to the next question for Sister Hart. But Dad, I'd like to ask you, because Pentecost was not always as popular or as accepted as it is today. So I'm wondering if you could just share with us a little bit, because our young people don't really comprehend this. If you could share with us a little bit about how did your parents or peers suffer as a result of being Pentecostal in a world that was so intolerant of anything that was new or different back then?
Well, when my father received the Holy Ghost, he received the Holy Ghost before his mother. And when he came home, there was a tent. Brother Lambert came and put a tent up in Bossier City. Dad and some of his friends went to the tent meeting. They thought it was a free circus because it was a tent. Well, he got the Holy Ghost. And when he went home, and he tried slipping in the house, my grandmother, which I call, to me, I'll probably say Nanny, because that's what we call my grandmother. But Nanny was asleep, and he came in, he went in and turned the lights on, and she said, "Turn the light on, son." And he flipped the light on, and she said, "Where have you been?" And he didn't say anything. He said, "I know you've been to that tent down there, and something happened to you, but I don't want you ever to go back." Well, anyway, he went back, and then later she went and received the Holy Ghost. But in our growing up, in our church, as it began to grow, they bought some property to build a church on, and put a tent up and have a revival. Well, the neighbors didn't like it. The tent meeting was the tent was right next to homes, and the services, like they were talking about, services did not quit at 9 o'clock. I mean, they would last and last and last. And the neighbors began to complain, and they called the police. The police came out to stop it. And first a couple times they cut the tent ropes during the day, and Dad would have to put the tent back up. And then they'd throw bricks through punched holes into the tent, not during the service, but through the daytime when the tent was up. But all of that. But so the police came, and while people were praying at the altar, it got a hold of my father and told him he's going to have to stop it. And Dad said, "I'm not going to stop it." And he said, "Look, over here." He led this police officer to the altar, and there was a lady there praying, and she was really praying. She was praying for the Holy Ghost. And my father said to the police officer, "See this lady? She's about ready to receive the Holy Ghost." And of course the policeman didn't know what that was. But he said, "Now if you want to stop it, you stop it. I'm not going to stop her from praying. And if you want it stopped, you stop it." He said, the policeman said, "Well, Manuel said, don't worry about it. Just go on. I'm not going to stop her." And she received the Holy Ghost. The policeman left. Never had any more problems. But really, as far as a lot of suffering, I don't recall my parents ever complaining about anything about the church. And though there were some difficult times, and Dad would come home from some board meetings, and they discussed difficult times, and Mother would say, "Well, what went on?" He said, "Well, that's it. I don't answer your questions about that. It's personal and private what went on in the church." But as far as us suffering, there wasn't a lot. I was in school, and about the most I suffered in school was I walked into a class, and the boys were laughing before class started, and I walked over to hear what they were talking about, laughing so, and they were talking about one of them, a little guy's name was S.W. Downs. I still remember his name. I was a junior in high school, and he was talking about the holy rollers and making fun that they roll between the pews and up under just roll all over the church and all that. And I looked at, of course I was tall and short, and I looked down at him. I said, "Well, S.W., did you ever see that take place?" He said, "Well, no, I've just heard about it." So I said, "Well, come over here to this window." And I took him to the window of that classroom and said, we could look across the railroad tracks and could see the church steeple. I said, "See that church steeple over there?" I said, "That's a Pentecostal church, and why don't you come and watch us roll in the aisle, and then you can come back to class and talk about it, because it's real for you. You know what's happened." And well, he never did come and watch us roll and all that. But that ended that one. And then I was in a senior in high school in English and literature class. There's a college prep class for going on to college. And the literature teacher assigned us to go to a movie, watch a movie. We were, I never did like Shakespeare, and one of the Shakespeare plays was going on or something, and she assigned us to go to the movie, and I just turned to the boys and the classmates behind me and said, well, I won't be going. And they said, why? I said, well, I've never been to a movie in my life, and I've never even been in a movie house. And they said, what? And they all started laughing. Well, Miss Montgomery said, what are y'all laughing at? And they said, well, Manuel said he's not going to go to that movie because he's never been in a movie house. And she said, well, just a minute. She asked me why I had not been to a movie and why I refused to go. I said, well, our church takes a stand against that, and I just don't go. I can't go to it. And she stopped the class. She said, listen, class, I don't want to hear you ever laughing at Manuel again about that. And you've all got to go to the theater, but anytime I assign something like that, he's excused. I don't want y'all picking at him or laughing at him about it. So that's about the most I ever suffered for taking a stand. And I wasn't ashamed of it. I explained it all to them. And what I say is that if you've got an experience with God, you don't have to be ashamed. You just stand up for God, and God will take care of you. And He'll take care of you.
That's the same way that I got out of having to take dancing lessons in gym class. I was really thankful for Pentecost back then.